In this video, we will be looking at the various different types of lighting in Maya. So, we won't be using any of these tabs here. What we'll be looking at is the rendering subtab here. Now we have these six different types of lighting, and we'll go through each one of them and see what they does. Now, if you hover over them, it does give you a brief idea as to what this particular lighting source does. You can see if I hover over it, we have ambient light, directional, point, spotlight, area light, and volume light. And we'll go through each one of these. Now, the ambient light basically casts a soft light over the entire scene. Now, you'll see here that when you create it, it'll go to the default center of the grid. And it's a small little icon here. Unfortunately, you can't scale up the icon itself. It will have to be that small. Some of the icons you can actually increase and decrease for, but with the ambient light, it does stay this small. You might have noticed you can't really see any differences right now. That's because over here, where all the icons are, you'll see this little light bulb icon. If you turn that on, it shows you all the lighting. And with the ambient light, because it casts a soft light in every direction, you'll see that if I move it around, it does affect where the light is. So this is influenced by its translation, not its rotation or scale. The second one is the directional light. And with this we can actually increase its size, as you can see here. If I turn that on, the lighting. Now the directional light illuminates all objects in the scene depending on its angle. That's why it's called the directional light. So you can kind of give it like a light source, if you will. It can kind of represent like a distant sun or a moon. So you see here, as I move it around, up, down, left and right, you see it makes no difference to seeing whatsoever. However, if I press E and rotate it, you'll see that it makes a lot of difference. And if you go to the attribute editor for any of these light sources, you'll see that you can change the color of your lighting. So if you want to go for something that's kind of more of a dusk, maybe sort of like a slight orangey hue to it, maybe we want to make it slightly colder, make a slight blue hue to it. And you can also change the intensity as well. You can see here I can make it brighter or make it as dark as I want. Third one is a point light, and it casts a light in every direction. It's quite useful for like an omnidirectional light, such as like a light bulb. When a light bulb kind of casts its light, it kind of goes all around, and it's kind of hard to find its actual light source. It kind of works similar to the ambient light, however you can actually increase and decrease its size. There's very little differences here with the ambient light. So this could be good for like say light bulbs and that sort of stuff. And again, you can just change its attributes as you see fit. Fourth one being the spotlight. So if I just angle this downwards, hopefully we can see. There seems to be an issue in Maya 2016 where you can't actually see a light preview of your spotlight. However, if I do render out the scene right now, as we see it here, you can see here on the render of this scene that there is a spotlight, the light is there, but for some reason in Maya 2016 you can't see it unless you render out a particular frame or a particular part of your scene. It's very strange. Earlier versions of Maya you were able to see it in real time, but for some reason with the spotlight you can't, which is extremely annoying. But you can see that it does actually create an effect. Now a spotlight basically has a well-defined light source. The whole idea of like a spotlight kind of stems from theatre. In theatres you have like sort of lights that kind of go into a certain direction. And you'll notice here in these spotlight attributes that you have way more attributes that you can manipulate compared to the other ones so far. So we've got the standard sort of colour intensity. You can see here that we can actually increase the cone angle, so that, again, that's more light kind of going off it there. The penumbra angle as well, and even the drop-off effect. You might not be able to see it here on screen, but you'll see here the light shapes. You can kind of see there's like a very sort of soft drop-off to it. Again, you can increase and decrease that as much as you want. So if we just render it out again now, you can see it makes a very big difference. And one thing you could also do to the spotlight is actually add something called a gobo. A gobo is basically a filter. It's used in theatre. Again, the same sort of ideas in theatre has been transitioned here into Maya as well. So where it says color, same sort of process as you would do with putting like a Lambert or like a texture onto your objects. We go to File, load up the file, and we should have a. I go up one. I believe I put it in the wrong folder. There we go, Gobo. With the Gobo, it's recommended to go for a black and white image. Black being no light can go through, white being light can go through to it. So if I load this up, and if I render out my scene again, you'll see now that we have a filter over our spotlight. So you can put anything you want in there. I would say make sure that you do go for a black and white image, because you can see here on the spotlight itself that the white parts, the white spots on that particular image over here do shine through the lights, and the black parts should kind of stop light from coming through. So maybe we use it for, like, say, like a wave effects, or maybe like the cross section of windows. So it is something to kind of play around with if you're setting up a really nice scene in Maya. Next here is the area light, and this creates like a basic sort of 2D rectangular light source. It's quite useful for sort of like backlit panels or like sort of fluorescent lighting, but the only issue here is that it does take longer to render out. So I'll just put this up against a wall. Yeah, it'll go up against this wall here. So you'll see that where this little line comes out is basically the direction the lighting will go. So again, if I just put this over here, and if I go to live preview, you can see a little bit. You can see a bit of the effect here as well. If I actually click on the rendering icon here, the render view, this doesn't seem to be that strong, unfortunately. So I could increase it. Let's see what happens if I increase it a little bit to render it again. We can see in real time that there is some lighting coming off of that. May need to move the area light a little bit closer. It doesn't seem to be showing up here on the render view for some reason. Let's see if I just put it a little bit closer to the wall. No, it doesn't seem to make much difference. But we can see here in the real time that there is some backdrop to that particular wall right now, as we see here. And the last one being a volume light. A volume light has a lot of the similar traits as a point light or the ambient light, except the volume light has a specific shape and size that does have a fall off effect. So you can kind of see this sphere here, so you can kind of get an idea of like how much light is going to kind of depart around that particular area. So if I turn the lighting on here, so again you can kind of see that there's a lot of similarities with some of these. The area light, the point light, and the ambient light do kind of have very similar sort of traits within them. You can see how much difference it makes here. Let's see if, yeah, and we can render it out and see how good it looks. So you can kind of see it gives it a bit of a fallout effect to your light source here. Some things you may need to consider when working with lights is a couple of things. One thing is the color. Color lights can be used to convey elements of the day. So obviously stuff like early morning, dusk, night. But you can actually exaggerate these. If you play games like, say, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, A Hat in Time. It's kind of like a small indie game. These things will use sort of color lights to kind of have sort of like exaggerated feel. And when you use color, you got to take into consideration color temperature. Color temperature is kind of like is best described as warm or cold colors. Warm colors would kind of be stuff like, say, yellow, orange, red. We psychologically see those as kind of warmer colors. Whereas look at colors such as blue, violet or some sort of shades of green can kind of be conveyed as a colder color. So we can use lighting to convey certain emotions or even certain types of temperatures if we want as well. But a very important thing is your use of textures. When you're creating your textures, you need to take in consideration how it bounces off those textures. If you make a texture too dark, and when you light it, if the textures aren't too dark, it won't really light up as well. But if it's too bright, then you might find that it's not going to look as great when you light it. So you have to make a nice balance between how the textures look as well as the use of lighting. The color and the surface area of the texture can really influence lighting as well. So you don't want to make things too dark, too bright. You got to kind of find that middle ground when it comes to your texturing as well. So what I would say is to just play around with the lighting effects, and remember to make sure that you use sensible use of lighting. For instance, I can't just put a spotlight right in the middle of this scene here, because where's the light source coming from? The direction light worked quite well because obviously this looks like an open space, like there's no dome in here, so there would be some lights from the sun or from the moon. We can see here that there is this little candlestick holder, for instance. So some light would come off this here if there was like a fire here, for instance. So you got to make sure that you're placing lights in a appropriate manner that makes sense. You can't just put an area light halfway across. For instance, if the light source is here, this area light would have to be around the same area as well. It wouldn't make sense to have it over here, because where's that light coming from? It's not coming from this area here. We have a candlestick holder here, so it makes sense that the light source is coming from this particular direction.